This is Dan Byram loading from Loops, and today we're with Chris Wells, retired Border Patrol. Uh, Chris, thanks for joining us. Maybe you can start off by telling us a little bit about your career.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. Was a Border Patrol agent for 30 years, and I'm also a second generation Border Patrol agent. My father was one before me, and that's originally how I got interested in the job. He basically called me up one day and said, "Hey, they're having an exam for the Border Patrol. Why don't you take it?" And I kind of guy that listened to my dad, both my
Yeah.
parents actually, and I took it, and boom, there I went.
Wow. And you did 30.
Yes, and I don't know why, but for some reason that was uh, a special time for me to. I didn't want to work more. I didn't want to work less, and it just so happened when I got to 30, it was like, okay, I've had enough.
Yeah, that's a good career, and it's tough work. Uh,
You know, I'm the kind of guy that I never looked at it as work. I just enjoyed it so darn much.
yeah.
Yeah, it was just so it had everything for a guy with my personality. It was exciting. Every night was different. There were a number of different duties and responsibilities that I could do. And then once I started promoting a little bit, well, that's another whole world
Yeah.
of responsibility, and you have to lead people and manage things. So yeah, it was pretty fun. I started out in San Diego as just a regular GS5 Border Patrol agent. I think I made like $11,757 or something like that a year.
What year was
And
that?
that was in 1980. That's when I signed up. And then I went on to serve as the PAIC of the Salinas station. Uh, then went to Washington, D.C., and worked a variety of things back there as an assistant chief. And then finally ended up my career down in the El Centro sector, where I retired as an assistant chief there.
Wow, exciting stuff.
Pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah. Uh, so in those stations, what was life like back in the 80s, like in the San Diego area?
Well, back in the day, as we always like to say, uh, the border, we had responsibility for 5 miles of the border, basically from California's I-5 highway to the coast, to the beach. And so we, it was called the Chula Vista Station back then. And we basically had anywhere from 6 to 10 guys to patrol that 5 miles worth of border. So we were extremely short staffed. And, in cop type of situations, you always hear about the young rookies getting put through the ringer and being tested and things like that. But I was fortunate that I was the son of a PA, so I was accepted very quickly. And they needed the help just so darn bad. And we had to go through a series of tests and oral exams and stuff like that once we got out of the academy. So that first year was a probationary year, and you could literally be fired at any time. So there's a lot of pressure. They put you through the ringer.
Yeah, yeah. Probation is tough.
Yeah, yeah, but the work was extremely exciting. It'd be nothing. It's a very unique type of law enforcement work. I mean, myself and my partner caught up to 100, people at one time by ourselves.
Wow.
It was out in the middle of nowhere at dark, in the dark. It was commonplace for me to catch probably anywhere from 25 to 40 people by myself
Yeah.
and out in the middle of nowhere. And people ask you, how did you do that? And I said, well, you just had to make sure you surrounded them. As they didn't know how many of you there were necessarily. They found out pretty quickly. But by the time you corralled a fairly large group, you just ran up to them and you started, you know, using command presence, telling people to sit down. You keep their minds occupied with what needs to be done rather than thinking about running or assaulting you.
Did you have trouble with smugglers?
We not direct trouble with smugglers, but more indirect trouble because the smugglers only want to make money. And so they hire these low level guides to try and get you distracted or to get their groups across. And if the group gets caught, back in those days, they were just sent back to Mexico so they could try again the next day. So our entire modus operandi was catch them, keep them till the morning, send them back, and let them try again the next day, and or dissuade them sufficiently to where they would not try anymore. They'd think it was too hard and just go home.
Yeah.
So the uh, no real issues with the smuggling organizations, although there was a time when I worked up in just before I worked up in Salinas, California, uh, the drug cartels put out a wanted poster, and I think it was somewhere around $5,000 bounty on one particular border patrol agent.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, nobody ever collected on that though.
Yeah, yeah. Every once in a while they get brave, and they're getting more brave every day. It seems like uh,
It does.
as I stay in touch with that, we in my line of work, we work with you guys all the time, and it was just amazing police relationship and brotherhood with the border patrol and
Yes, it was.
and the old customs guys. You know, when we
Yeah,
was out there, they were good. So you did a hitch in DC.
yes. I from 2000, well, 1999 to probably 2000, mid 2005.
So you were in DC at 9/11.
Yes, I was. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Very trying time. Like most cops, I believe, can tell you exactly where they were, what they were doing, exactly when that happened.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that must have been challenging. It was chaos for years. I
Yeah,
mean,
we actually, as headquarter personnel, we were uniformed officers that carried, and right after that evening, we were all deployed to several federal buildings to guard those buildings and be on the lookout for additional attacks, or we didn't know what was going to happen. So I didn't go home for 2 days because we were busy doing the several INS buildings and a couple others in that area. And then or immediately on the heels of that, we had the DC shooter, and we had the anthrax scare. So it was a turbulent time back then.
yeah, it was a lot of people forgot or weren't around. You know, it's hard for me to process that there's people in police work that weren't even probably born then, but
Yeah, no kidding.
thing-
Every officer and employee in law enforcement wants to succeed, but do they have the tools they need? Backup is on the way. Excellence in law enforcement courses bridge the gap between strong departments and strong communities through often overlooked interpersonal and communication skills. Discover affordable, asynchronous, cutting edge online training in developing character, critical thinking, establishing trust, and command presence. Visit Sabbath Learning to investigate further. We offer individual, agency, and academic rates.
it was
A number of years ago when I first got in, I had occasion. We had this grizzled old salt. His name was Jaime, and I had a chance to discover when he first got in the border patrol, and even back then he had joined the border patrol the year before I was born,
oh my,
and then as an agent, and then later on working in national recruiting, and then as an assistant chief. It was very common to have people that had weren't even born when I joined.
yeah.
So yeah, that circle goes right around.
It really does. That's part of the philosophy of this loading from loops thing, to carry on some generational knowledge and give people an idea of how things were and maybe some perspective on how things are going. But when you started, what kind of equipment were you issued?
Well, it was basically the minimum, I'll tell you that. We There were times when we didn't have enough vehicles, and so they would load everybody in a van, and they would take you down to the area that you were going to be working, and you had a walkie-talkie and a flashlight, and you basically worked about a quarter to a half a mile worth of area with just that. And if you caught people, then you would call and they would come pick them up from you, and then you'd get out and run around and try to catch some more. But most of the time you had a vehicle, and you had intermittent radio communications if you were in a canyon down in San Diego, or if you were in an area that didn't get good radio reception, you were on your own.
Yeah. Did you have wheel guns in 1980 or automatic?
Yeah, I had a Ruger Security 6 back then, just a wheel gun, and I spent many an evening, doing what we would call, still watch, where you would sit up on the levee of the Tijuana River, and your presence would keep people from crossing through that area, and I would practice endlessly, loading either from loops or later on, using speed loaders.
Yeah, yeah. The newest technology speed loader.
Yeah, yeah, cheating, right?
Yeah. So you went on Del Centro, uh,
Right.
and what was that like out there? I guess it's that area is a hot spot right now, or at least there. And what is it? Just west of there, there's some hot
Right.
spots going on.
Is it Hakumba?
Pacumba.
Yeah. Um, it's funny, things never change in the political aspect, where what you see on the news isn't always what's really going on or where it's going on. You can rest assured that, yeah, there'll be some hot spots, but generally, the overwhelming number of crossings that we're getting in San Diego and El Centro and those areas aren't well reported on the media, and so people, I think, maybe have an idea that it's not really happening to the extent it is in some of the other areas, and it's happening everywhere. The cartels that direct all of this, they're very, very sophisticated, but in a very simplistic way. They like to use human assets rather than a lot of technology.
Sending people out to report to, in simple terms, it would be like giving people sales areas. You get your territory as a
Yeah.
salesperson. You're sent out there with a district manager and a manager and then the sales force, and dividing up the country to distribute whatever products, human, chemical,
Right.
biological, I guess, that they're going to distribute.
And the smuggling organizations, um, they know these areas like the back of their hands, and they're very sophisticated. They know what works, they know what doesn't. When we throw some new technology at them, it's always pretty quick for them to figure out how they're doing it. And I think most of the time you see the basic modus operandi of what they're doing doesn't change that much.
Yeah. Yeah. In spite, I have been involved in tech for a few years, but in spite of what people say, I think a clever human will always defeat technology, and it doesn't have to be that clever. Human ingenuity always wins
Yep.
somehow. They will always defeat it. So, if you had to give some advice to a young Border Patrol agent coming up through the field, through the ranks, is starting out, they're sent somewhere, whether it's Holton, Maine, or the border, or wherever they're going to be. From all of your perspective, what would you tell them, if anything?
Well, right now, this is a unique time in the Border Patrol history and our nation's history. The political challenges are daunting. Uh, the wide open border that has been created by this current administration, I'm surprised people still even gravitate to this, because you don't sign up to become a law enforcement professional and then all of a sudden you're basically standing there welcoming people into the United States. But I would tell people that don't let that dissuade you. It was probably the most fantastic thing and opportunity and career that I could have done, and that was throughout 30 years worth, where the politics were starting to take their hold even back then. I think this time too will pass, and I think we may get ahead of all this again, because before this last 3 or 4 years, we really had what we call operational control of the border. We have more technology, more equipment, fantastic training, far beyond anything I ever had coming through. And that's not just police work, but it's also in management and some of those leadership areas. So it's a great agency, and there's not a border patrolman I don't know that we used to go out and we'd eat somewhere and we'd see a young man or young woman that just kind of looked like they had what it took to
Yeah.
be in law enforcement. And boy, we were our own best recruiters. Many times I've run into people that I actually recruited, and over the years we'd kind of keep in touch and we're friends.
Yeah. And I tell you, I've always valued my buddies from the
Yep.
Border Patrol over the years. They've always been great cops and great friends, guys that you could count on. Often the outdoorsman type. I know you're
Right.
a surfer.
Yeah.
You're a pretty rugged individual, but it's always an exciting career, I think, and nothing but respect for the Border Patrol. So, well, listen, Chris, it's about time for us to wrap up. I appreciate
All
you
right.
being on. I hope you'll join me again and we can talk about some more Border Patrol stories.
Always glad to hang out with you.
All right. I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you.
All right. You take care.
Loading from Loops is brought to you by Sabbath Learning. Register now for the Excellence in Law Enforcement courses. Click the link below for more information.